Are we nearing a Fed pivot? Could we be seeing something completely different in November and December as we round out the year? We're going to be breaking into all that good stuff, where the market might go. I think you're going to like this one today. My name is PlanB. Welcome back into Tech Path. Joining me, of course, is always the one and only Gareth Soloway, who comes in from In the Money Stocks. Great to have you back on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Great to be here.
Yeah, always fun when we get a chance to really kind of dice it up a bit. Gareth, first thing, I know you were in Dubai. Was there anything at the Dubai event that kind of stepped you back and said, wait a minute, there's some interesting stuff happening here? Anything that kind of perked your attention?
Yeah, so I mean, the Dubai event is just the blockchain part is just one part of the whole thing. And there was a flying car, there was a hovercraft. I mean, it's just some cool stuff out there, I'll tell you. In the blockchain stuff, there was some unique stuff, but I wouldn't trust myself explaining it properly. But definitely there's some big things on the horizon.
Was it a very crowded event? Because this is one that I almost went to and was kind of on the fence about. How does the show up being?
Yeah, so it was crowded. So I went the previous year when Bitcoin was near all-time highs,
Mhm.
and I figured this one would be kind of quieter, but it was honestly just as packed. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of eager people out there looking towards blockchain and new technologies every single day, more and more.
Yeah, I think this is a big shift we're in the midst of. I want to jump into with you mainly around the traditional security side of things. Obviously, we'll see this October being a fairly decent month for, in general, if you look at the stock market. Stock slipped obviously here on Monday, but it's closing out its best month since 1976. There was a couple of points here that they kind of went to, traded down about 0.5% lower, but on average, performing well in October, which wasn't, I don't know that that was necessarily on the cards, but we've seen a few things that have kind of alluded to that. And then I wanted to jump to a tweet right here. Investors love it when Apple, let me zoom up on that, when Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, Tesla, Google all made up about half of the NASDAQ. Time to pay the piper here on this.
Yeah.
So when you look at that and what we saw with, let's just use Meta as our sounding board for right now. Where do you think especially from the tech stock side of things, do you think that the time is up for most tech stocks and we are going to see a time that is going to be just building for a while before we start to see any kind of return?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that the tech stocks are having their kind of reckoning day. They got these valuations because every pension fund, every fund was just loading the boat and continuing to kind of get into them, and that gave them these nutty valuations that even an Apple had. And still, in my opinion, even with Apple going up on earnings, it's still a little on the pricier side. Now, Meta is
Yeah.
starting to become interesting to me. That is definitely seeing a big discount. I love when everyone's hating on a stock because that's usually when the emotion is too bearish and you'll get a snapback. But certainly we are seeing the reckoning. And you saw the Dow, right? I mean, the NASDAQ
Mhm.
100 is barely positive on the month, but the Dow's having
Yep.
its best month in a long time. It tells you there's a rotation of capital going on.
Yeah, which has been kind of the scenario. A lot of traders I know and I've been talking to over the last week, there are some big wins out there right now. Everything kind of shifting to energy, more and more of the potential commodity side of things, which we'll see probably transition throughout the winter months and obviously into the Q1. So I think there are going to be some plays here. I was looking at this article right here, Meta. Buy it for the next decade. So this gets back in, I think, to your thesis on this, and I'll show you a tweet in a second. Stock dropped 25%, terrible earnings, and you saw the numbers. I mean, it was just a hideous performance. But when you look at Meta as a whole right now, where do you stand on this right now? Is this one that you think can pull itself out of this, and what is the long-term effect for it?
Yeah, so I think Meta's in a particular situation. And what's so fascinating about this is to compare it to Snapchat, right? So Snapchat had horrendous earnings as well, dropped like 25, 30%. But then a few days later, it rallied back basically to $10, about 30% or so. And initially, when Facebook reported just the numbers, the stock traded to 141 from about 130. And then all of a sudden, we saw that Zuckerberg was still going to be spending $10 billion, and the stock just tanked, right? So what this tells me is that their core business is still, basically the valuation where we were was fine for the core business. It's this spend crazy kind of atmosphere where the market does not want to. In a bear market, people are not going to give it 10 years to produce, right? In a bear market. Now, in a bull market, what's fascinating is we've seen all these hopes and dreams give crazy valuations. But we have to remember that it's a difference in types of market. And right now, investors are not giving more than a year out.
So here he goes on to say, Meta should return to revenue growth and increase profitability substantially in the coming years. There's a high probability that the stock is near the bottom, even though we can continue to see the market a little bit down. I'll show a chart in a second. And then I want to show a clip here. Also, this one was kind of interesting right here from Mr. Kramer. Let's
Free
play
cash
this one
flow
real quick.
Last year, 9.5 billion, now less than 1 billion. Yeah, let me say this about this. I made a mistake here. I was wrong. I trusted this management team. That was ill-advised. Hubris here is extraordinary. And I apologize.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that was just, Kramer wrecking a lot of people, unfortunately. But he said something there, free cash flow. Free cash flow with Meta right now, considerably less than what they had been performing, which really was a cash cow, is a cash cow in the way of Facebook. But that business could be not necessarily going away, but definitely on its waning side of things, which is where we see Web3 and Meta kind of moving to overall. Your thoughts on that, free cash flow?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why Zuckerberg is being so kind of hard-headed in spending for the metaverse. It's because he sees that their core business is eventually going to slowly disintegrate. And again, we're still talking, probably a decade plus out, but he's kind of building the table. And I said this in a tweet. I said that, if you have that horizon and he builds out the metaverse and actually succeeds, and listen, we should also give him credit. Mark Zuckerberg bought Instagram. People said they overpaid for him. That was a genius move. He bought WhatsApp. They said he overpaid and it was a genius move. So part of it is the market and investors not willing to give him credit and kind of believe in him at this point. And I think part of that too is that he's the controlling shareholder. And therefore, it's whatever he wants goes. You don't have a kind of a checks and balances in the system either. And I think that makes investors very, very nervous. But I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years, the market cap of Meta is more than Apple or any of these other companies if he succeeds.
Yeah, I just want to bring that tweet back up again. Your statement here, long-term vision, likely that Meta will be the most valuable company on the planet, in about 10 years. So I am in a position with Meta, and we just did a couple of videos last week on this. I like the vision. I like, of course, me being a tech guy, I'm always pro somebody who's pushing the envelope, because I feel like that's really what stretches the boundaries of not only technology, but how the human species advances, because we're going to see continued opportunities here. And Web3 and really what metaverse might play into, and we won't even, let's say if we don't use the term metaverse, as according to Apple, it doesn't exist. So even if it isn't that and it's something else, the likelihood is Apple comes in and plays in this sandbox as well. Do you think Apple has a chance at being able to go head to head if in fact they do create, whether it's an AR device or they do create kind of an app ecosystem that enables something like this? What are your thoughts on Apple in comparison?
Yeah, so inevitably, I'm a believer that Apple, as soon as they see that there's money to be made in a massive amount, they will jump in. We heard about it with the electric car. So far nothing's come of that, but their whole ecosystem. I mean, they have this ecosystem with such dedicated investors and clients that inevitably, if there's money to be made, they're going to get involved, and they have the cash on their balance sheet to do it in a major way. I mean, talk about a cash cow is the Apple company just producing so much money. So I think that, again, that's part of Zuckerberg's play here. He's like, I have to get a head start here. My core business, yes, it's going to slowly decline. It's still a great cash cow, but this can fund the next big thing. But again, the problem is it's not paying investors right now, and that's what investors want.
Yeah, I want to jump to your chart on Meta, just in general, because obviously it's correlation to what's happening in the crypto market from a tech side of things, because it's kind of interesting in the aspect. When you look at it right now, trading at around $93, which is down even again over just the last couple of days. How do you think this plays out in the next, say, month and a half?
Yeah, so I'm in the camp where I do expect some sort of big technical bounce. And I think one of the things that as a trader, and number one, as a trader, we have to look for technical levels, right? So one of the things I'm seeing is there's a ton of support right in this level, right around $86 to $87. So it's not that far away, another $7, basically another day like today, and it would be almost there. But that is going to be basically taking you back to this consolidation period before the breakout that continued, you could arguably say, all the way into last year was basically that's when it started. So this would be what I would consider to be kind of a retrace to the beginning. And also, if you look at the valuation of Meta and what it was producing back in 2015, you can't argue with the fact that the company is much more profitable, much bigger than it was back then as well. So there's a lot of value here. And I do think that people are at the point of just kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And if Zuckerberg, if he just gives even an inch to this market or to the investing public and says, hey, listen, we're going to buy back, $5 billion a year and maybe only spend $5 billion or $7 billion on the metaverse, you could see a massive, massive short squeeze in this name. So to me, I love opportunities like this. I mean, this is where, as an investor, yes, there's risks, but you've discounted it to such a level that it's basically there's no expectations. And when there's no expectations, it doesn't take a lot to just outperform.
Yeah, I would agree in the sense, especially when you look at just technology. And remember, this is still Facebook, still one of the biggest cash position social media platform, is the biggest cash position social media platform on the planet. These guys are not going away. The fact that he's committed so much into this, and somewhat of a successful launch with MetaQuest 2, the new headset. We've already started to see things rolling out in it. It's creating a very interesting buzz, and I think application is going to start playing into this in a very short period of time. In 1 year, look how fast it's come. Another year from now, to your point, could be playing into some very interesting positions. Even if you were just betting on the stock, let's just get away from the metaverse for a second and just betting on that stock. But I do think we're going to see a lot more partnerships for sure.
And I also think that, what's going to be amazing here is you're setting it up where their expectations are very minimal, if not zero. And if you just, if let's say there's just some sort of guidance given by the company that in 3 years they'll be producing X amount of revenue from this, that would be earth shattering to investors. It's just one of those, honestly, at these levels on Meta, and again, it's not to say it can't go lower. I want everyone watching to make sure you understand that. It could go down to 85, it could go to 80, 75, but at some point you're going to see a monster snapback in a name like this.
Yeah. Watch it very closely, guys, because I do think it has a lot of relevance, not only to metaverse in general, but what might end up in Web3, which of course starts to correlate to a lot of the crypto projects. Let's jump over to Bitcoin and let's talk a little bit about the big, kind of what a lot of people are looking at, what they're calling Moonvember. Trading experts now kind of pushing into anticipating a little bit of a big move here. All of this is tied to the FOMC this week. It's a 2-day extravaganza that we'll hear from the Fed. We'll get a chance to see what Powell decides on. What are your forethoughts on where Powell will stand? I'm probably pretty sure I know where you think on the rate hike, but what about the comments after? What's your feeling?
Yeah,
right now?
And the bottom line is whether we get a 50 or 75, and I think the market's pricing in a 75.
Yeah.
The market is rallying, and we're well off the recent lows on the hope that he's going to pause. So we're not talking about a real pivot in that he would start to cut. That's not going to happen. But the market just wants him to step back for a few months and reevaluate the data for like 2 or 3 months in a row. And so I think that's what the market is hoping for. And if he does do that, I think you see a bounce or a pop in the markets on Friday. If he still talks about raising in December another 50 or 25, I think the market's going to get pretty scared again that he's overdoing it, and you're going to be pushing this market into potential major recession, not just minor. Minor's kind of the base case at this point for me.
Yeah.
It's a matter of how bad does it get, because again, we haven't even, he's raised now 375s, probably four per week. You could argue that maybe only one of those rate hikes has filtered into the economy at this point. And so there's a lot of filtering that needs to go on, and we have to see where the economy stands at that point. And that's scary to me.
All right, so I want to make sure I've got this clear. If he goes with the 75, your feeling is that's an expected, priced-in situation, but not really going to move the market too much. If he goes with a 50, you feel like this would be an absolute bullish signal. We would see market action immediately.
Yeah, I think 50 hike would be bullish, but it's the comments afterwards, right? It's the comments of saying, okay, guys, we're going to take a break here for 2 months, let's say, or 3 months, and reevaluate. Yeah. Or does he say, hey, we're going to still keep hiking in December, and on and on? And that would be more scary for the market. So in a weird way, I don't even think 50 or 75 is that relevant. Everyone knows something's coming. It's about what he guides, the guidance essentially.
Yeah, and I think the scenario that this trader was kind of looking at, I just wanted to look at his chart. So this was Chris Berninsky, Willy Woo, which we've covered on the channel before. And basically it's kind of a modified version of what they call the NVT ratio, which uses a 90-day moving average for this to basically look at October being an up month. Let's jump to your charts, Gareth, because I want to get your opinion on how this may play out, especially on the Bitcoin chart.
Yeah, sure. So let's bring that up right here. Flip over to Bitcoin, and basically what we have on Bitcoin, we had a breakout that occurred about 10 days ago here, right? So we had this beautiful downsloping trend line, and this is something I was expecting. I think last time I was on, I said we might go as high as 22,500, maybe 25 on this pump. But it was all predicated that we would break out of this channel, right? Or this wedge pattern. And that's exactly what we did. And now what you're getting here, after we got this 2-bar move up, we're basically seeing sideways chop. Well, as of now, that sideways chop is called bullish consolidation. And what's interesting is it's consolidating into the Fed on Wednesday. So my guess is we're going to stay sideways choppy into the Fed on Wednesday. And then you're either going to see the most probable outcome, which will be a move up, or if the probabilities fail, then you'd see the downside move. But I would favor the upside with a target here of around 22,500 near term. Maybe max upside would be 25 over the next month or so into year end.
That's if we get a positive November, pinning again on how the Fed leans into the back half of the year and obviously in the first quarter. Right. I wanted to kind of highlight, this was a TED Talks macro tweet. A lot of talk about the pivot, Fed breaking things, etc. Need to stop the hiking, but the data shows otherwise and points to nothing other than hawkishness again this week. So, our sentiment trend is still pointing down. Sometimes that's insignificant of how the market feels in the essence of not only inflation, but just price hikes in general, business in general. Do you feel like the Fed is far enough caught up to the current market conditions now, or do you feel like they're still playing catch up in the market and they're kind of working with yesterday's news?
Yeah, so I still think that they're working with yesterday's news in terms of the inflation levels. I've been very shocked, to be honest, that they haven't discounted the strong jobs numbers more. Maybe it's just because the inflation data has stayed so strong that they're willing to not play into the jobs data being a lagging indicator. But I do think that at this stage, they're going to find themselves, and you saw, there was like $1 trillion that investors had kind of squirreled away for spending during COVID and after COVID here, and they paid down credit card debt. If you look at the recent credit card numbers, credit card debt is soaring again. And so what you're seeing is an investor or the citizens of the U.S. at least, that are at a point where they're getting back to their levels of debt that they were, and they will have to be cut off, or they will cut themselves off at some point if the economy starts to weaken significantly. So I am concerned that I think the Fed again is going to overdo it, just like they overdid it with stimulus and thinking it was transitory. I think they're going to overdo it here and then have to play catch up. And honestly, wouldn't shock me to see interest rates go down in late 2023 or early 2024.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because the situation on credit, the credit crunch aspect of this is something we've been talking about on the channel for quite some time. That's the one I'm most concerned about. To your point, is that now we're in a phase where that is actually being exercised by the American people, and I think that in itself is going to continue to put that lagging effect onto the Fed, which is going to create these additional, pressures, especially around hawkish statements, kind of going forward. Here's another piece right here he had a pretty good tweet stream, but inflation, employment, market data inform the Fed's monetary policy stance since the previous Fed meeting in September. Core inflation continued to run hot, and the employment market is remaining strong. So again, we're still seeing not necessarily jobs affected dramatically, but yet at the same time, we are seeing now new job numbers that are starting to show the potential direction of where this might go in terms of unemployment. But that's mainly because wages haven't gone down. So that still being the case, November, if you were to look at this market with what you know right now on whether it's a hawkish statement this week or a potential neutral stance, hawkish or neutral, I think, is a negative position. The only way this gets positive if he goes dovish. What are your thoughts on November? Do we see another up month here for the markets in general and Bitcoin, or do you think this is more of a down month?
Oh, wow. So as we get into November, and this, I mean, to be honest, a lot of this, and I'll show my chart here, a lot of this is going to be predicated on what the Fed does, just like you said. And so note the one thing that I'm kind of eyeing is the fact that if we zoom out on this S&P chart, you have this trend line that's sloping up and then this little bit of an area right here. And so we're right into a decent resistance line right here. Now, if the Fed says the right things, we could pop as high as this downsloping trend line, which would be around just over 4,100 on the S&P 500. But I am concerned that we've already had a big rally up. If the Fed, again, doesn't kind of give the market that pause after a hike, then I think we're headed very quickly to the downside. And it still concerns me, honestly, that we haven't even retested the pre-COVID highs, right? The February 2020 highs on this market. We came close, but we didn't get there. So for me, I'm more inclined to think that it'll be a whippy November, but it wouldn't shock me if at some point we see a down November overall.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're in agreement with that one, at least on that. We'll get a poll here at the end of the video to kind of break that out and see what the audience has to say about it. November has been the caution month for me just because of the kind of things. I feel like this is a very critical month moving forward. It's the catch-up month. It's obviously now midterms are starting to dissipate. We're going to kind of set the political stage going forward. The Fed will have at least a little bit of understanding what the Q1 might look like. And we've already got the third quarter earnings in. So everybody kind of knows what's on the table. So this is a really critical month going forward. I want to talk or show you guys a tweet here by El Capo. He's been pretty much on the last couple of calls here. So Dixie bullish, the SPX key resistance, Bitcoin and ETH were forming a top. We see that right now. Kind of playing in, and then protect your profits. New lows are likely in November. So again, kind of going in with that narrative of where we might see a little bump and then possibly a little bit of a face plant moving forward in that. And I think that's the scenario. I was just looking at Fed Watch, and you're right, there it is. 75 is kind of still holding at the 88% probability right now, at least for what looks like. With that being the case, Gareth, if you were trying to trade this, all right, it's because some people might just be sitting here on the sidelines waiting for a move. But if you were trying to trade this, where would you trade this? Would you trade this in precious metals, maybe in the energy sector, crypto? How would you try to play this? Not financial advice, but just thinking through your head.
Yeah, so for me, definitely in the metals. I'm more interested in looking at the metals here. If we bring up gold, gold is continuing to kind of pull back a little bit. We've seen the dollar stay relatively strong. The one thing that I've been noticing on the U.S. dollar is that, and I'm going to bring up the Dixie here, is that
Yeah.
you're in this kind of range where you're starting to make a high, lower highs, and lower lows. So again, we could be seeing maybe a short-term top in the dollar. The fact that the dollar's rallying into the Fed statement makes me think that it might see a reversal to the downside, and that might help us in that near term get a risk on gold trading higher type move. So right now I'm just keeping an eye on it, but I would say for me the safest place, and this is key because you could say, okay, if the dollar is going to go down, then stocks are where you want to be, but I'm not feeling comfortable enough to put serious money into stocks. Versus gold, I still have that very bullish midterm as well view on gold. So I'm more in the metal side of this.
Okay. All right. One of the compatriots of I think gold in general is Robert Kiyosaki. He talks a lot about this, and he's also now pointing at this statement right here: Bitcoin can protect consumers from existing Fed hike paranoia. So his theory is that we might be closer to the bottom on Bitcoin, and this could be one of those assets that we want to ride out in terms of volatility and what the markets might play. Do you agree with where Robert is going around this? Just pretty much this is their plan going forward.
Yeah, so I do agree that we're closer to the bottom, considering 69,000 to
Sure.
20,000 is yeah. But so I mean, this is the issue: is that I think we're all in agreement that at some point Bitcoin is going to pivot into a safety trade. But the question is when is that going to happen? And I just don't see it yet. It's still too speculative. We don't have the framework for regulation out there yet that's going to get money, the big money, comfortable enough to get into Bitcoin as a safety asset. At this point, there's still a lot of money that's too scared to even go near it. So I think, again, yes, I agree that will happen. But for me, it's more of a 6-12 month out type thing before we see that pivot. And that still leaves the door open for the next equity dump to cause Bitcoin to also have a dump.
Yeah, which is the one that we're watching for right now, because I'd still think we're in a scenario where Bitcoin does get a bigger correction, and whether it gets to a new low, at least the local lows, which is around the 17K number, still up in the air. Again, a lot of other macro pressures that were coming in. Europe, even though we are seeing a little bit of a pivot in the ECB and what's happening within Europe. Do you think that has a bearing overall on what could be happening here in the United States in terms of rate hikes and inflation in general?
I do. In fact, I think that you saw the first flicker of the Fed, pausing because of the currency issues that the U.S. dollar is now inflicting on places like the UK, the European Union, as well as in Japan, with the Japanese central bank actually intervening in their currency markets as well. And so I think, weirdly enough, everyone says, oh, the stock market being down is why the Fed's going to do it, or the economy or the economic data. I actually don't think any of those. I think if you weren't seeing the pressures of potential global currency collapse out there, the Fed would probably be looking to do another 50 in December or so after a 75 on Monday. But it's at a point where they really can't. And these central banks, and by the way, one of the reasons you knew this is because two Fridays ago, the Wall Street Journal released an article saying that the Fed was going to hike 75 and then pause, right? And the reason we know that's significant is because in the past, the Fed has used the Wall Street Journal as a conduit to let the market know. And not only did that happen on that Friday, but then literally an hour later, the Japanese central bank then intervened. And to me, that was a very coordinated event where it told you that central banks aren't just closing their eyes and doing what's just right for their country. They're paying a global attention to the other countries out there, and they're kind of coordinating.
Yeah, I think this is important because a global perspective, especially around Bitcoin, you look at Hong Kong trying to revive its financial center, now looking to recruit crypto industry. So the question is, could we see a pivot here with China on this and playing back into it? I mean, there's problems within China. If you look at them from a demographic standpoint, one of the oldest aging populations. Many people think I think it's 2035 that they will be down under 500 million was the last data I saw, which would be dramatic in the essence. You're talking about not most likely by then the United States could be at that number. And if you kind of balance out the aspect of the amount of immigration that's coming into the U.S., the amount of declining population in China, could China be playing back into crypto and blockchain? Any thoughts on the international play of where this is going?
Yeah, and I mean, China has just been such an insane market these days. I mean, not only is their real estate market just imploding, but then you have a government, and we saw what happened when Xi got reappointed, and kind of the ripple effects that sent through the system, the global financial system, including some of the stocks out there like Alibaba, Baidu, and some of these other ones. So I mean, I think that, I look at it like a communist regime has to stay in power. Well, the way you stay in power is you keep people happy. Well, youth unemployment in China is extremely high. They have to be aware of that. And there's other issues out there that are really grinding their economy down. So you got to think that he's aware, the president, the premier is aware that he has to get the economy back on its feet. And one of the ways to do that is allowing blockchain stuff, crypto back in, as well as kind of loosening the stranglehold on some of these private firms and these publicly traded firms.
Yeah, for sure. I want to get to two more tokens, and one is Ethereum. When you look at Ethereum, you got Vitalik over here saying, hey, listen, crypto is better than gold here, all right? But at the same time, Ethereum, and when you look at the transition, obviously with ETH2, we've seen a lot of movement within it. What do you think, and how do you think, will ETH continue to track with what's happening with Bitcoin through this fall and early to next year, Gareth? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I think for the most part, they're tied. I think the weird divergence could come when we get the regulatory stuff and from Gary Gensler at the SEC, because again, there's going to be this defining difference where we know that Bitcoin is a commodity. We know that likely an Ethereum is more of a security, but we don't know the specific rules that this the crypto markets have to play by. And I think as you start to see this come out, it makes sense that you'll start getting varied valuations, right? What does a commodity get valued at versus a security like Ethereum could be? And what are the rules that it has to abide by? So I think that this is going to be a pivotal point where you could see maybe potentially Ethereum really start to play catch up to Bitcoin in terms of market cap. If the regulatory stuff is put into the right form, right? It's all about the right form.
Yeah, regulation. Speaking of regulation, we're going to talk about XRP. Before we jump to that, on your chart, when you look at Ethereum right now, its position, is there a pivot point for, let's say that we go into this and we do get a dovish play from the Fed. We get the 75, but a dovish response that we're going to kind of pause for a moment. How do you think that would play out on Ethereum's bones?
Yeah, I do think Ethereum would go higher. And if I show my chart, I'll show you where. So it's going to have some interesting levels. And if you take the all-time high on Ethereum going back to November of 2021, and you stretch a trend line right here, you actually have Ethereum just underneath that level. And that's going to be the big test for Ethereum. If it can get through there, you've got some potential solid upside north of 2,000. But I think as a trader and an investor, we have to really be watching this. Like it's right around 1,680 bucks. You got to see, can it get through there? If it does, you got quite a bit of upside at minimum back to this double top right here, maybe even higher. But right now it's stuck below resistance. Maybe the Fed news will push it through that level.
All right, so you feel like that is a possibility. Again, all of this being where we might get that little bit of a pump here in November. The question mark will be how this starts to transition, obviously with inflation numbers. What we'll see in additional macro pressure kind of coming into the market as well, which plays into when that pivot might occur. And I would be giving our listeners and viewers an opportunity. But before we get to that point, on the question of when the Fed will pivot, make sure and smash the like button, because this is something that helps get everybody out there and aware of what's happening, not only in crypto in general, but really in the financial markets. So it might be a first time for many people finding us. So make sure and smash the like button. Gareth, when you think about pivot, because I still am on the fence that I don't think this is a pivot in November or December. I'm looking to next year. Are you in that camp, or where do you feel that might play out now?
I'm in the camp that I think the Fed will pause but not pivot, right? So I guess it's the definition of it. I'm not sure what your definition is, if it's the same or not, but I think that you'll see 75, and then they'll say, okay, we're going to at least wait till January or February to reevaluate. And the only reason I'm leaning towards that is just from that Wall Street Journal article and how the Fed has used that in prior periods to kind of convey what they're going to do. Now, again, let's keep an eye once we get this Wednesday number. Let's see what the jobs data is on Friday. Does it come in a little bit weaker? What about the next inflation readings? I mean, so there's a lot of points that will go into this, but I think the Fed has to be fully aware that, number one, they can't have the dollar making new highs in the near term. That could be cataclysmic for Europe, the UK, Japan. And if they continue to stay really hawkish, then you're going to see that dollar rip, and you could have breakages in the system. And then I think overall, you just have to think that the Fed is fully aware that things are slowing. I mean, look at the earnings, right? Look at the tech earnings. I mean, they were pretty atrocious. How do you just close that off and not look at that and say, okay, this is telling us something about what is coming down the pike?
Yeah, which I think Q4 is going to be the one that really gives the tail of the tape. Obviously, we'll start to see kind of the holiday numbers and then eventually the real numbers come in. And that in itself, I think, will give way to inflation scenarios playing into it. Jobs will start to play into this, especially on the corporate side of things. And just a lot of job cuts, which could get back into the jobs report in January, which will be the one I'm more interested in watching. Last up is XRP. And when you look at XRP, there's been a lot of movement in the space, a lot of looming potential here with November 15th, this month, being potentially what we could see in either a final settlement or a summary judgment from the court that could put XRP and Ripple in the winner's seat. If that happens, I'm looking at my chart, and if you look at just the month of September through end of October, still an upline trend here right now. We've been playing XRP for a while, even though it is kind of moving in a little bit of a flat zone there. Gareth, what does your chart show for XRP, and do you think this is one that can stick around for a nice rally should they get a good decision?
Yeah, so I mean, number one, if they have a good decision, this thing can rip. There's no doubt about that, right? So if it goes the way of XRP, this thing probably has maybe $1 written all over it. But that's a big if, right? And so we have to kind of be aware of that is a question mark. It's not really what I would call a high percentage trade to know what the judge or guess what the judge is going to do. What I do see is, and what I can just follow is that you had this breakout, right? Beautiful breakout outside of this longer term wedge pattern. And basically you topped out, made sense, right? This high here became this high over here, or that low became this high. And since then, we've been going sideways. And this, again, would be viewed as consolidation. So bullish consolidation as of now. The one thing I would not want to see happen, see this trend line connecting this low and this low, I don't want to see price trade below that. As long as it doesn't trade below that, I think you do have some potential upside on it. And I would probably give a slight positive bias to the judge's decision being positive to cause that rip.
Yeah, well, that obviously November 15th, the big day for Ripple, and I think just in general the crypto markets, because if we do see the judgment come through, we could see a precedence being set that really change maybe the whole dynamic around how legislation is going to flow out into the space, which at that point alone, depending on what's happening with the Fed, what's happening with some of the macro numbers, we could see a very interesting scenario playing out, which I think December might be an intriguing month to play. I know we're going to get a chance to talk to you before then, but a lot happening in the space. I want to get to our poll real quick, and then we'll take a couple questions. All right, so will November end in a crypto rally? 53 holding yes, so it's kind of a split audience right now. I'm still on the no camp on that one with 47. I feel like November's a little bit more soft. Let's go in here to a couple questions. Yeah, so this is Joseph. What he's talking about, XRP will settle soon, triggering a massive bull run. Do you think that could really happen if, let's assume the nirvana occurs. The SEC gets their butt kicked. The judge comes in and says this wasn't a security and is setting precedents possibly for the entire market. What would happen to crypto at that point? What's your feeling?
Oh, I mean, I think if that happened, you'd see 20% upside in Bitcoin in basically a day. I do think that would be huge because remember, everything that the market is craving right now is knowing. And if
Yep.
this would basically set a precedence, like you're saying, and that would give a lot of relief to a lot of people, would make a lot of shorts cover as well in the crypto space. So I think you'd have a massive rally across the board. I hope it happens. I don't know if it will. It's just, I think as an investor, remember that this is a high risk environment and you don't know which way it's going to go. So don't, there's a lot of people that want to just gamble. Technically, just make sure you're gambling then with money you can afford to lose.
Yeah. A lot of people loving Doge with its crazy upside with Twitter. Have you been watching that token? It's been absolutely insane coming off. I mean,
It has been insane. And I have been watching it, and it's simply, bottom line is we know Elon Musk is a Doge fan and he bought out, he did take private Twitter, and there's just speculation that maybe he'll make it kind of the universal crypto of Twitter, which would be huge for Doge. There's no doubt about it. So I think there's a hope of that, and that's why price has gone up so much.
Yeah, and you guys, we've done a couple of videos, so check back in the channel. We've broken them down, why we think this is happening, where it could be potentially going. A lot happening around BNB, Solana, all those tokens are kind of playing into this. Crypto asset investor is saying, do you reckon we will get a 2-month rally and then a crash going into Q1? So this is something that, I'm on the fence that the back half of this year, not super juicy. Maybe there will be some swing trades coming in. And definitely on the altcoins, I think there will be some opportunities there. But I'm looking for really more in Q1 to see some upside. What are your thoughts there?
I think a lot of it's going to come down to, number one, what the judge's decision, like we discussed just before, is going to be, and that will set the tone into year end. I still think, again, new lows will come in the crypto markets. It's just a matter of when. Whether it's before year end or not, we'll have to see. But again, I'm in a short term bullish bias with a midterm meaning bearish bias going over the next couple months.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks a lot for all the super chats, guys. There's one in here. Will crypto regulation change the dynamics of how this bear market plays out? And what will regulation do to the charts? On your thoughts there?
So number one, I think the biggest impact to this bear market is the Fed not printing money. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit careful on when I say the bear market is going to end, because we've never had something to compare it to in crypto's history with the Fed not printing money. Number two, I actually think that regulation, as hated as it is, I actually think that could be one of the things that actually helps us get out of a bear market. As you get clarity, we know big money, $1 trillion funds and so forth. They're going to be looking for rules that they basically have to analyze risk. And the only way they can analyze risk for their funds is by knowing the rules. And I think that will give them clarity. And if it's not too crazy on the regulation, then it will draw a lot of money in and actually help get us out of this bear market.
Yeah, and that's the real scenario that plays into the way you think about what Kiyosaki is saying, that this may be the new safe haven, potentially a great opportunity there. Many people kind of pointing to this. We've seen a lot of variations around this, especially depending on where the regulatory landscape lands. And again, if you guys are not paying attention to what's happening in the regulatory side of things, I would suggest get in there to YouTube. Take a look at the Bankman-Voorhees interview that was done with Bankless. I mentioned this on the show earlier. It's really a very interesting interview, or I should say debate, between Sam Bankman-Fried and Eric Voorhees, which is the Shapeshift founder. And he really broke it down into the landscape of where regulation needs to go and what the pitfalls of regulation could be. So it's a big one to watch, and you need to pay attention out there to what's happening. Gareth, as always fun to have you on the show breaking down charts, and you're killing it over there. So thanks a lot for stopping in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, we'll leave a link down below. If you guys have never checked out Gareth's site, In the Money Stocks, we'll definitely leave a link in there so you guys can find a little bit more about Soloway and his trading tactics, all that good stuff that they're doing over there at In the Money. And then, of course, if you guys are not in the Diamond Circle, get in there, because it's a really easy thing to do and it's free. It's a great tool for you. We drop a couple of emails. There's some additional content in there only available to members. And it's the best place to kind of connect to community. So do that. If you guys want to reach me, it is out there on Twitter at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.